Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. The tariff...
You don't want to call it a tariff war, but it's...
Skirmish, conflict.
It's escalating.
It's escalating. $200 billion worth of Chinese imports got slapped with a 10% tariff by the Trump administration. Spread $200 billion worth of Chinese imports spread across thousands and thousands of products.
And then China slapped back, putting tariffs on meat, clothes, chemicals, auto parts, pretty much everything we buy from China.
Yeah, except the iPhone. Interesting. There's a theory in economics called the tax salience theory, that people adjust their consumption habits based on increased price, but where that tax is applied. More likely to adjust their consumption down when a tax is included in the price, which of course is the case with the tariff, versus when sales tax is added on at the cash register, for example. Mm-hmm. Same reason you see sensitivity to gas prices, because it's kind of widely advertised. It comes out of people's disposable income, and so they're more sensitive to it than they are, say, withholding from their salary that they don't see. They don't have to write a big check for. Or if you pay property taxes out of an escrow account versus having to write a big check.
Right, it's a big difference.
It's
a different kind of pain.
Which is why I think, by the way, and I'd like to advance legislation in Illinois,
that everyone should not have their taxes escrowed?
Correct. You have to pay your property tax. You have to write a check.
I've tried that.
Wake people up a little bit.
Try to keep it separate and have an own fund. But if there's an emergency, then you have to dip into that fund, and then you're screwed come property tax time.
Well, so the question is, are we still in this beginning or intermediate phase of short-term pain for long-term gain, the long-term gain being a lower tariff environment across the board, and frankly, suffering a little bit to really impose punishment on a, competitor, but collaborator as well when it comes to the voluntary exchange of goods and services, particularly goods. We're talking about the Chinese, of course. For answers to those questions, we're pleased to be joined again by our friend Steve Moore, chief economist for CNN, Wall Street Journal columnist. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hi, guys. Good morning.
Morning. So is this a new phase in the trade policy of the Trump administration? Are we getting to a more precarious place, or is this just the continued execution, and there's going to be more pain in the short term for that lower tariff environment across the board that Larry Kudlow envisions?
Well, to quote Winston Churchill in 1941, this isn't the beginning of the end, it's the end of the beginning. So, we are in the middle stages of this, I guess we could call it a trade war. You're calling it a skirmish battle. But look, this is tit for tat, no question about it. We've imposed $200 billion more on them, and China's immediately retaliated with their own tariffs. Look, that's going to make, I was listening to your discussion, that will make the things that come in from China more expensive. So when you go to Walmart, consumers are going to have to pay a little bit more for stuff.
And you're getting to intermediate goods when you're starting to impose tariffs on things like circuit boards. So the price of computers and electronics.
True. So that means you were saying that it's not going to affect immediately the price of the iPhones and so on, but it's certainly right at the end of the day.
How is it that iPhones aren't a part of this? I mean, China slapped, meat, clothes, chemicals, auto parts.
Yeah.
Why not the iPhone?
Well, see, this is something that I disagree with pretty strong. Look, I actually do believe it's time to get really tough with China. So, I don't like tariffs, but I don't see any other alternative to get China to behave. And so I think that it is time to get tough with them. But what I don't like, Amy, is this idea of picking winners and losers. And that's what Trump has done here. He's basically saying, this will have a tariff, that won't have a tariff. My feeling is if you're going to do a tariff and I wonder if Dan and Amy, you agree with me on this. If you're going to do the tariff, it should be imposed on everything. Don't say, because you had that. I think Tim Cook from Apple was over at the White House, a week ago or so, and then lo and behold, Apple's phones aren't you're not going to have the tariff on those. I think that kind of is too much an insider trading kind of thing, and let's impose it on everything and not pick winners and losers.
But what is the end game though in terms of punishing China?
The end game, look. Okay, so that's a great question. What is the objective here? First of all, we are in a tit-for-tat situation, no question about it. And I remember when I was over at the White House many, many, many months ago and spoke briefly with Trump about this, and I said, look, you impose more tariffs on them, they're going to impose more tariffs on us. And his response to that was really interesting. He said, Steve, at some point they're going to run out of bullets. And, what he means by that is that we buy $500 billion a year of goods and services from China. They buy $150 billion from us. So at some point, if it's like $25 billion, we're going to impose 25, you're going to impose 25. At some point, they're going to reach their 150, but they're going to have tariffs on everything that we buy. But we still have, massive amounts of stuff we buy. So I think Trump sees the leverage here. My bottom line here, what has not been reported by most of the media, Dan and Amy, is that China is in a panic right now. Beijing does not know how to deal with Trump. Their economy is really taking a hit from these tariffs. I mean, they're maintaining a stiff upper lip. But, you look at what's happened to their stock market. You look at what's happening disinvestment in China. You look at how their growth rate has fallen in the last year. They're being hit hard by these tariffs. I don't think they can withstand them, for more than a year or so. So I think this is going to get settled within 6 months.
Don't you feel bad for the auto industry? I mean, they might collapse because if you don't buy a brand new car now, you should not do it in a few months because the price is going to go up.
That depends on what happens with these auto tariffs. That's a whole different issue. And by the way, I'm not in favor. I testified last week in front of the Senate Finance Committee where I basically said the auto tariffs aren't even going to help the auto industry. Did you know the auto industry is not in favor of the auto tariffs?
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty amazing. But you know why? Because they buy all these parts from all over the world.
Right.
I mean, when you buy an American car, a Ford, the parts come from Singapore. It's assembled, and the steel comes from Canada. It's assembled in Mexico. I mean, these cars are really internationally made, whether it's got a Nissan, whether it's a Nissan or whether it's a Ford. And so what a lot of these companies are saying is, look, if you impose these auto tariffs and the steel tariffs, you're going to make these cars more expensive that are made in America, and you may make foreign cars more attractive.
But the implications, though, of inducing slow growth, or maybe go so far as to say inducing a recession in China with a market of 1 billion people.
Look, I just don't think China can withstand the pain very long. Although that's not a knowable thing, right? I mean, Beijing, you've got Xi is now president for life, so
right.
He doesn't have to face voters. But look, it's a question. The question you're asking, Dan, is what is their pain threshold? How much are they willing to let their economy falter? And incidentally, a lot of this, I'm told from the China people who are doing the negotiating for the United States, who know a lot more about China than I do, say a big part of this for Beijing and for President Xi is just saving face, right? They don't want to be seen as folding like a cheap tent to Trump. I think in the end of the day, they're going to have to do that. Look, I will tell your listeners this with almost 100% certainty. Donald Trump is not retreating on this. He's not going to back off. I mean, China's either going to have to make major concessions here. And by the way, they should. They have huge restraints on our ability to sell goods in their country. They're stealing $300 billion of intellectual property every year. They're building up their military in a huge, huge, dangerous way. I mean, it is time to get tough with China. It is time for the United States to use our leverage, which we have a lot of leverage over them, to get them to start behaving. And I don't think Trump will back down.
Right. I mean, look, but if we induce some sort of Tiananmen Square moment because China's economy is crashing, what does that mean for the United States economy? What does it mean for the global economy when you're talking about, admittedly, a communist developing nation, but 1 billion people?
Well, that's a great point. Look, first of all, the United States has benefited from trade with China, no question about it. For the last one, I mean, every time you go to Walmart, you get low prices every day, and half of that stuff is made in China, so that benefits consumers. There's no doubt about it. You and I and Milton Friedman agree on that, no question about it. I think what Trump is saying is, look, we've benefited, but they've benefited a lot more. I mean, we basically subsidized their economy, through allowing them to have free trade with us, even though they don't allow us to have free trade with them. And Trump is basically saying, like, the jig is up on that. You're now a developed country. You're now a world economic leader, right behind the United States. It's time to put your big boy pants on and act like a civilized, advanced nation, which means stop stealing, stop cheating. I talk to CEOs of companies all the time who say it's almost impossible, Dan, for them to do business in China because you have to give up your trade secrets. You have to, give up ownership sometimes of your company. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's preposterous, and we can't live with that any longer. But you're right. Now, look, if China, I don't want China to go in the wrong direction. I don't want them to go in the direction of Tiananmen Square. We want them to move towards more freedom and more open markets. And unfortunately, in the last 6 or 7 years, they've moved in the opposite direction.
Right. That's a big gamble with communists for life, as we saw with the Soviet Union.
Dan, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to be the questioner at this point. What is the alternative? What if we're not going to do these tariffs? What are we going to do to get China to start behaving?
Well, I mean, we've talked about this before. My position, as you understand it, at free marketeer, is always it pays to be preemptively free trade. So we should lower tariffs because we should look at policies that are in the best interest of the American consumer, not kind of the artificial construction of a U.S. economy versus the Chinese economy. I'm interested in the 330 million Americans and their quality of life, not some abstraction. And so that's the approach I would take.
And look, I don't disagree with that. I think my position has changed a little bit. You're kind of arguing, for a unilateral free trade, we should be Hong Kong, right? And,
yes.
And that certainly worked out well for them. I guess my response to that would be, look, an even better option would be to get China to buy more of our stuff. I mean, it helps American farmers, it helps American workers, and why not? Why shouldn't we use our leverage to make? If we're going to all Trump is saying is we want a level playing field here. If we're going to open up our markets to you, the deal is supposed to be you're going to open up your markets to us, and you haven't done it. And by the way, the Europeans, have been deficient in that area. He wants the same thing with Canada. And by the way, he's winning on this. That's the other thing. He got a deal with Mexico. He's going to get a deal with Canada. That's better for the U.S. We're going to get potentially zero tariff option in many goods and services with Europe. So we may end up with a more free trade regime. I know you're skeptical, Dan.
Well, I hope
but I think we may end up with more free trade at the end of the day.
All right, I'm counting on you and Larry Kudlow. You guys better deliver. He is Steve Moore, Wall Street Journal columnist, chief economist for CNN. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
All right, have a great day. Take care.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.